Assalamu alaikum. Hello, hi everyone. How are you? We are learning HTML in Codecademy platform. We did the first part elements and structure. Now we'll do the table. Let let's start. And before I start, I want to tell you I will give you every link in my description. So please do not forget to check the descriptions. And I will add the time stamps that will help you to jump through whatever section you want to. So let's start. HTML tables. Create a table. Before displaying data, we must first create the table that will contain the data by using the table element. And in the table element, we have this opening tag and closing tag. The table element will contain all of the tabular data we plan on displaying. So before we create the table, let's see the index.html file. See here, first declaration the HTML, then they use the HTML opening and closing tag. In the HTML opening and closing tag, there has two portions, head portions and the body portions. Inside the head, they use the title. We cannot see the title in Codecademy browser. Ship to it company packing list, and after the title they use the link. This page looks like it has style sheets, so they use that style sheets here. When we learn CSS, we actually know how to link in a HTML file the another CSS file, and in the body part they use this unordered list and set as a class navigation. You can see here, this is the logo. You can see first the list item, this get the image is shipped out. Then the another list is action list, profiles and settings. And then after unordered list, they use the div plus search the table. There they use the CSS to make like a search table. Now after the div class, I create a table. So as we learn, when we create a table, we have to use opening and closing tag. Table opening and closing tag. So when I run, now nothing shows up because inside the table we haven't used anything. So we'll learn later on. So first, table rows. In many programs that use tables, the table is already predefined for you, meaning that it contains the rows, columns, and cells that will hold data. They give a link. If you can see, this is the Wikipedia of table. As we all know, the table has that column and rows. So in HTML, nothing different than the usual table. So the first step in entering data into the table is to add rows using the table row element like this tr. So here they use the two tr, means there will be the two table rows. So in the example above, two rows have been added to the table. So next, add two rows to the table in index.html file. So here we create the table. Inside the table, they ask me to do two table rows, and table rows will do this opening and closing, and I'll just simply copy and paste. So click run. Nothing's in the output because inside the table rows we didn't add any cell. So table data. Rows aren't sufficient to add data to a table. Each cell element must also be defined. In HTML, you can add data using the table data element td. So here they create a table, and here is a one table row. Inside the table row that has two table data. So let me use this one, so that copy so that we can see the output. Okay, so I'll use this table data. We can see, if I run it, so we can see that this table row, I haven't add anything inside, but after this two table rows, in the third table row, I use two data. So here you can see these two cells. If the table are displayed in the browser, it will show a table with one row and two columns. You can see that. Here we use this two table row, but in this two table row, I haven't add any table data. But this third table row, I add this two data so that it is visible now. It shows like one table row has two data and means two columns. Okay, now the instruction says, in the second row, add three cells of data. The cells should contain the following data in order. So they asked me to do, in the second table row, they told me to add three data. So table data is opening and closing. Closing tag always have to use that forward slash before you use the table. And I add three table data. Now if I run it, it says that is empty three cells because I haven't put any information inside the table data. Now we'll copy and paste. And when we paste item, we have to make the sequence in order. So now I add, there is three columns added in the second row. Because first row we haven't used any information, that's why the first table row shows nothing. Only the second row is visible, but we can see as a single row has three columns. So next, table headings. Table data doesn't make much sense without titles to describe what the data represents. To add titles to rows and columns, you can use the table heading element, TH. The table heading element is used just like a table data element, except with a relevant title. Just like table data, a table heading must be placed within a table row. Here is an example. So before we read that example, it will be easy for us to see the example how it looks. So let me comment out this table. And as you know, in HTML, we will comment out by using exclamation like this. Start from this angle bracket, exclam minus minus, then the end I will do this minus minus. So now the example table I'll copy. You can examine how the table works. If I run it, so in this table you can see they use two table rows. Here is one table rows, another is here one table rows. But in first table rows, they use three table heading here. First table heading, they didn't put any information, so it's a blank, empty table heading. The second table heading, they use the scope call, means the Saturday, the heading they use as a column. And the third one, the table heading, they use the Sunday as a column as well. And then the second table row, they use the scope row, means they use the table heading. So this is the second row, first data they use as a heading, that's why they use the scope row, means they use the row as a heading, then they use the two data cell. That's the explain. I think it's talking about what happened in the code above. First, a new row was added to hold the three headings, a blank heading, a Saturday heading, and a Sunday heading. The blank heading creates the extra table cell necessary to align the table headings correctly over the data they correspond to. In the second row, one table heading was added as a row title temperature. Here is the second row. Use the title as a temperature. When rendered, this code will appear similar to the image. You can see that the output and our output is the same. Note also the use of the scope attribute, which can take one of two values, row and col. This value makes it clear that the heading is for a row, and the col value is the clear that the heading is for a column. HTML code for tables may look a little strange at first, but analyzing it piece by piece helps make the code more understandable. Yeah, when we do on your own, that will be little easy. Okay, now I want to delete this table. So the example, whatever they will tell me to do, I will do it. Comment out. So comment is that's very useful. Okay, in the first row, add 3 table headings. The heading should contain the following data in order. So here is the table. First row was empty, so now they asked me to add 3 headings. So TA is opening and closing tag /TA. So I'll copy. Three table heading, copy and paste. Click run. Now you can see there is the 3 column appear and we use as a heading. So that here we can use scope equal, since we use the heading as a column, so we can use this scope call. I'll just copy and paste and it will use. In this 3 heading I use the scope equal call so that it will be easy for us to see that this 3 column as a heading. Oh, number second attribute says now add a scope attribute to each of these new headings. I did that. So next is table borders. So far, the tables you have created have been little difficult to read because they have no borders. In older versions of HTML, a border could be added to a table using the border attribute and setting it equal to an integer. This integer would represent the thickness of the border. Here they use as a like border equals, and the 1 means 1 pixel. If I add this in table, border equal 1, then if I run it, you can see the border around. If I use the 2, then it will be little thick. You can see that it's little thick, the outline of the table. In the code in the example above is following is deprecated. Deprecated means no more use. So please don't use it. So I will not use it. It's meant to illustrate older conventions you may come across when reading other developers' code. The browser will likely still interpret your code correctly if you use the border attribute, but that doesn't mean the attribute should be used. So since we see that we use the border and we see the thickness outside of the table, they can render, but that is not supposed to use now. So they said we use CSS to add style to HTML documents because it helps us to separate the structure of a page from how it looks. You can learn more about CSS in our CSS courses. So you can achieve the same table border effect using the CSS table. So here this table TD border 1 pixel solid black means that each cell represents as a black solid line and the thickness will be 1 pixel. So when we learn CSS, we will learn that's the way the CSS runs its code. Okay, now we are going to need some more data in the table. Add the following data to the table, make sure to place it after the second row. So I'll copy all the information because here is one row the information. They need more so that the table will be little more. So after the second table row, I'll use all the table row. Let me use the indentation so it looks good. Now it looks good. So when I run it, you can see the more row is added so that the table looks little big. So it's simply just each row has 3 table data and information. So next, spanning columns. What if the table contains data that spans multiple columns? For example, a personal calendar would have events that span across multiple hours or even multiple days. Data can span columns using the call span attribute. The attributes accept an integer greater than or equal to 1 to denote the number of columns it spans across. See, there is the example. They use this table data as column span 2. Let me copy this table. So I will comment out this table for now to examine the example of the table. So for that, if I copy this table, it will be easy for us to examine. So here we can see the first table use the 3 table heading Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. So first table row use this 3 column as a heading, and the second table row they use the first TD and they span the column span 2, means they use this 2 column space as a single data, and the third one they use the another data is back in town. So in the example above, the data out of town spans the Monday and Tuesday. You can see here. Table headings using the value 2 means 2 columns. The data back in town appear only under the Wednesday. There is the single data. Okay, so in index.html span a TD elements across 2 columns. So now I will delete this table information and I'll use my instructions table. Here it says span 2 columns. So I can use the second table row. The first column I want to use call span equal 2. So let's see. The first table, the first one is the heading. The second table row, I use this first data as a 2 column span. So you can see here, since I use this first data as a 2 column, then the second table data is pushed further down to the third column and the third table data to push further right. So how the column span actually works. Okay, then click next. Spanning rows. Data can also span multiple rows using the row span attribute. The row span attribute is used for data that spans multiple rows. Perhaps an event goes on for multiple hours on a certain day. It accepts an integer greater than or equal to 1 to denote the number of rows to span across. So, this is the example above table. Here, they use this first row as a heading. First one is empty heading, then the second heading is Saturday, third heading is Sunday. The row, it will be easy for us if I copy and see the example how the output works. Use this table out and I copy this table so that you can see the output. Here in this table we can see this first three column, but first table heading, this one is the empty heading, this one second heading, and Saturday is the second heading, and Sunday is the third heading. And the second row, third row, and fourth row, they use this first TD as a heading, and here the word use the row span 2. So in the second row, but they use the 2 rows, means next row they use the space also, and the relax they use the 3 row span 1, 2, and 3. And the second table they use the afternoon as a heading, and no data, because both data in the second row use as a one word, another is relax. And the third row they use the evening as a table heading, and the dinner they use as a data, and third data they didn't use because the relax use 3 row span space. So the example table looks like that. In the example above, there are 4 rows. You can see here is 4 rows. The first row contains an empty cell here, and the 2 heading columns, Saturday and Sunday. How the 3 heading works, like this, table heading. Then, number 2, the second row contains the morning as a heading, along with work, which spans 2 rows under the Saturday column for the work, and the relaxed empty spans 3 rows under the Sunday column. The number 3, the third row only contains the afternoon row as a heading, and the fourth row only contains the dinner entry, since relax span the 3 into cell next to it. Okay, now in example it says span a TD elements across 2 rows. I will delete this table. And in the example table, in the instructions table, I'll do this 14 I will use as a row span equal to. So you can see the table 14 will take the 2 row span. Since that 14 was the second element and I used 2 row span, so third row, the third element went further to right. You can see that table. Because first one they use the column span, that's the package items was further right, but the 14, the second element data in third row, I use the 2 row span, that's why the same invoice go further right. So next, table body. Over time, a table can grow to contain a lot of data and become very long. When this happens, the table can be sectioned off so that it is easier to manage. Long tables can be sectioned off using the table body element, T body. The T body element should contain all of the table data excluding the table headings. More on this later on. So if we separate the table as a table body except the table heading, so if we have the big table, it will be easy for us. We should separate the table heading and the table body. So this is the same table, but except they use also here table heading as a table body. So here enclosed rows 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as the table body. So nothing will change in table, but they ask me to do that except the first row that we use as a table heading. Beneath the first row and from the second row, I will as a T body, opening and closing tag. So I use all the table data, I'll select it and I'll make it indentations so that it will look good. and this one I'll use T body. Done. Table nothing changed, but we separate the table heading and table body so that the table looks little bit more readable. So next, table head. In the last exercise, the table's heading are kept inside the table's body. When a table's body is sectioned off, however, it also makes sense to section off the table's column headings using the T-head element. So here they use this heading TI's data. In the first row, we use the table heading, and this one they separate as a T head, like the T body. So in the example above, the only new element is T head. The table headings are contained inside of this element. Note that the table's head still requires a row in order to contain the table heading. Additionally, only the column headings go under the table head element. We can use the scope attribute on TAS element to indicate whether a TAS element is being used as a row heading or a column heading. So as we know, in table, if we do the table heading, scope call using is very helpful to understand that this heading is as a column-wise heading or row-wise heading. If we use scope equal to row, means the portion will be heading as a row. So they asked me to separate this table as a table heading. So I use P head. The table will not change except it will be more readable and little bit organized. I'll close it. P head. Looks good now. So in the table, we separate like table, table head, and table body. So next, table footer. The bottom part of a long table can also be sectioned off using the T-foot element. So here in this table, they use the table heading. There has 3 heading column. Then they use in the T body, they use rows first column as a head and 2 as a data, and it does, and they have the footing T-foot also. Let me copy this table so it will be easy when you read the example. So we'll comment out our table. Now we can keep our table here so that we can look. So after the first table, I'll paste the second table. Here, this is the second table. You can see this table heading they use here. 3 heading, quarter, revenue and cost. And the second row, they use the Q1 as a heading. That means this one is a row heading. So we'll use scope equal row. Then these 2 data, same as third. And the fourth row, they use the total as a heading here. And 2 is a data. And this T-foot, they actually sum of these 2 data, the result is here. So in the example above, the footer contains the total of the data in the table. Footers are often used to contain the sums, difference, or other data results. The instruction says add this total TD as a T-foot. So first table will go after the T body. We'll use the T-foot. After the T-foot, they asked me to do the copy these 2 cell data. That means there is no row heading. But inside the 2 foot, I should use table row. TR. Inside the table row, I'll add this to data because each table we have to use the table row. When I add this first table, you can see here we use the total data. But the number here altogether is equals 28. Next. Styling with CSS. Tables by default are very bland. They have no borders, the font color is black, and the typeface is the same type used for other HTML elements. CSS or cascading style sheets is a language that web developers use to style the HTML content on a web page. You can use CSS to style tables. Specifically, you can style the various aspects mentioned above. So in CSS, if it's like unfamiliar to you, so when we use CSS, that will be very easy. In this table, they use this table heading and table data as a border will be 1 pixel solid black and the font family like the typeface, Arial sans serif and the text align center. Sometimes as we know the Microsoft Word we use left align, right align, justify or center. Here they use the center as a table heading and table data is also center. Okay, in the code example above demonstrate just some of the various table aspects you can style using CSS properties. So here they include the CSS style.css and it says we have included .css file containing instructions for styling the HTML content in the index.html file. In style.css, set the font size of all tables heading TAs and table data to 18 pixels. So I have to check the table TD and TAs. This one TAs and TD, but where is the table TAs TD? There is table TD. Oh, they use separate as a TS and TD and they said I have to use font size. So font weight 14. I use how this is the way we can write down on CSS. This is the property name and the value TX. After the done, we have to end it with semicolon. So if I run it, you can see the table data is little big than before. You can change if like I did 22 pixels, it will be little more bigger. So you can see the table data, the size increased. So let's back to the 18 pixel. It looks a little small. Okay, so next review. So good job. In this lesson, we learned how to create table, add data to it, and section the table into smaller parts that make it easier to read. Let's review what we have learned so far. The table element creates table. The TR, table row elements, adds rows to a table. To add data to a row, you can use the TD element as a table data. Table headings clarify the meaning of data. Headings are added with TS element. Table data can span columns using call span attribute. Table data can span rows using the row span attribute. Tables can be split into three main sections, a head, body, and a footer. Table's head is created with the T-head element. Table body is created with the T-body element. Table footer is created with the T-foot element. All the CSS properties you learned about in this course can be applied to tables and the data. Congratulations on completing the HTML tables. So in the HTML code, you can see here we use the table and inside the table opening and closing tag we separate as like table heading. Table heading we have to use the table row as a table represents the each row. Here they use the three table heading column. And they use the scope attribute as a column. And the table row, in table body, we use several table row. And if you use the column span space, how many space we want to use as a column wise, or how many space we want to use. I mean, each cell will use the number represents the cell data as a row wise. And we use the table footer if you want to use information like total and summation or subtraction or minus anything, addition or subtraction. So you can use that key foot. So we did. Next, we did the HTML tables. So next is quiz of HTML tables. So that means this lesson is ending now. So hope you like my teaching. If you like, please like, subscribe and share with your friends. Bye bye now. We'll see you next quiz. Thank you.